I am the daughter of a wealthy elite family. After the marriage alliance, my husband treated me with cold detachment, and on the very night his true love returned to the country, he didn't come home at all. It didn't matter. We could each do whatever we wanted. But when I brought my lover home, he suddenly turned red-eyed. You, a mistress, still dare to bring him into the house? My lover didn't care in the slightest and looked at him with a mocking smile. You can bring your mistress back too. Paula won't mind. After all, the more people, the livelier it is. Chapter 1. When Damien opened the door, I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, smoking. His movement paused for a fraction of a second. A flash of guilt and embarrassment quickly crossed his eyes. Why aren't you asleep this late? His voice carried a rare trace of caution. I didn't answer. With a click, the living room lights turned on, bright as daylight, blindingly so. And even more blinding were the photos scattered across the coffee table. So many that some had fallen to the floor. They showed Damien kissing other women, embracing them, entering and leaving hotels. His pupils contracted sharply, all color draining from his face. His thin lips pressed tightly together. What do you want to do with this? I slowly lifted my head and looked at him leisurely, my expression still calm and composed. Damien stared fixedly at the pile of photos, his eyes bloodshot, using anger to cover up his panic. You actually followed me? The corners of my lips stayed slightly curved. I didn't respond. A suffocating silence spread through the air. Damien seemed to realize something as well. He opened his mouth a few times, then swallowed his words back down, his brows deeply furrowed. Given our status, there were always people watching us. Even if I did nothing, these photos would still end up in my hands. His gaze flickered as he weighed the situation. I suddenly felt a wave of exhaustion and irritation. There was no trace left of the young man he once was. To Damien, I was merely a politically convenient marriage partner with power and status. But no one knew he had been an exception in my life. In middle school, I once passed by an old, weathered gate and saw Damien. That day it was raining heavily. He used his school jacket to wrap a drenched stray kitten. The door was locked, and the eaves barely covered even a sliver of space at the threshold. Half his body was soaked by rain, yet the kitten in his arms was well protected. It kept trying, again and again, to stretch up and kiss the side of his face. The boy had a faint smile on his lips, his eyes gentle and warm. I asked the driver to stop the car for the first time in a long while. Fortunately, a low, dense green tree concealed the vehicle. Damien never noticed my gaze. That scene reminded me of when I was 10 years old. I had also picked up a stray kitten. It was my birthday, so I mustered all my courage to bring it home. But what I received was a scolding and a night locked in confinement. At my birthday banquet, the adults laughed and chatted freely, completely ignoring the missing main character of the day. Claude, my driver, quietly told me he had found an adoptive home for the kitten and told me not to worry. But the helpless anger in my heart only grew stronger. I was too weak back then to even keep a cat safe. After that, I took the initiative to learn all kinds of complicated business courses and strict elite etiquette, while other children watched cartoons and played pretend games, living in laughter and play. I studied finance news, attended investment classes, learned horseback riding, golf, piano, painting. I grew up immersed in the world of power and wealth, learning how people truly function. Even the curve of my smile was carefully designed to be the most appropriate expression. I grew into the perfect air, but somewhere along the way, I seemed to lose the ability to feel joy or anger. Faced with praise or envy, I would smile politely and thank them, while inside remaining numb and detached. Damien's appearance was like a crack in my gray world, letting in a sliver of light. He reluctantly placed the kitten at the entrance, his clear eyes filled with sorrow. I guessed he, too, had a similar past, so I had Claude by that old courtyard and built a refined little cat house for it. Claude smiled brightly. Miss, you are truly kind-hearted. My brows twitched slightly, but I said nothing. Kindness is lethal for an heir. In truth, I regretted it the moment it was done, but the kitten kept wobbling over and rubbing against my trousers. An unfamiliar emotion quietly took root, and the sealed part of my heart began to ache faintly. I stroked its head. It obediently nuzzled my hand. I couldn't tell whether I had helped Damien and the cat, or saved the helpless version of myself from the past. Chapter 2. Claude gave me a lot of information about Damien, the second son of the Martinez family, barely noticeable, but my gaze was always drawn to him. In the cafeteria, he ate sweet and sour pork ribs and steamed cauliflower every day without fail. Sometimes he arrived late and the dishes were already gone, so he simply didn't eat. He never went to the third-floor cafeteria reserved for the wealthy elite. Such strange habits, I found them amusing, so I made arrangements with the cafeteria staff to save a portion for him every day. The cafeteria auntie's warm smile and the properly portioned hot meals seemed to catch him off guard. The feeling of being favored by someone made him happy. The smile on his face was impossible to suppress. Damien liked playing basketball after school. He would only leave when the duty supervisor impatiently urged him to go. I replicated the same arrangement. From then on, the duty supervisor always turned a blind eye for him. Damien would head home in the sunset after an exhausting game. The basketball he casually tossed into the air, revealing his good mood. Claude stood beside me, smiling kindly as he watched Damien's cheerful figure disappear into the distance. "Miss, are you playing a raising someone up game? That boy is quite good, he suits you well," I replied with a smile. Maybe. The term raising someone up was indeed quite accurate. Claude chuckled teasingly. "Miss hasn't been this happy in a long time." Claude, read fewer novels. Haha. Yes, miss. The images in my memory gradually overlapped, finally converging into the mature, refined face before me. That youthful warmth had quietly faded, replaced by calculation and hypocrisy. In the end, he became exactly the kind of person I despised the most. So I didn't want to play this game anymore. I lit a cigarette. The sound of the lighter was crisp. The flickering flame blurred his face. "I can explain." His lips opened and closed several times. But in the end, only that pale, powerless sentence came out. "Don't explain anymore. What are you going to do about it?" I reminded him again, my tone already laced with impatience. Damien's eyelashes trembled. A hint of confusion and bewilderment appeared on his cold face. He murmured, "Don't you have anything else to say?" I almost laughed. He was the one who cheated. What was I supposed to say? "What do you want me to say? Divorce? Or should I bless you too?" "I won't divorce you." Damien suddenly raised his voice. "Whatever you want. I can give it to you, but I don't agree to divorce." Damien Martinez quickly regained his composure, as if his earlier loss of control had been an illusion. I paused slightly. Wasn't he supposed to be desperate to divorce me? After all, Lillian had already returned to the country. He stared at me intensely, grinding his teeth. "I'll give you 15% of the Martinez Group shares. No divorce. We live separate lives and don't interfere with each other." So that was it. He couldn't let go of the identity of the Martinez heir. A moment of silence passed between us. I stood up and pulled out a mocking smile. "Deal. Wishing you a long and happy life together." After I left, he stood in place, staring at my back for a very long time. Chapter 3. Claude said, "Miss, Damien is simply ungrateful and heartless. Are you really going to let him off like this?" I looked at him in confusion. "In your eyes, am I actually that kind?" He gave a subtle expression and lowered his gaze without saying anything. I was speechless. No one else knew, but Claude understood everything clearly. Damien had essentially been forced into marrying me. He had once done all kinds of reckless things for Lillian. In the capital, everyone knew Lillian was the girl he loved down to his bones. He skipped school, got into fights, drank, and raced cars for her. He even swore he would never marry anyone but Lillian. At one point, Martinez's father was so furious he almost disowned him. It was as if he had been under some spell. During that period, he became rebellious to the extreme. I could not connect him with the young man from my memory, the one who carefully held a stray kitten in his arms with gentle eyes and a soft expression. Martinez's father cut off his financial support and pressured him heavily. He warned that if Damien insisted on being with Lillian, he would lose both inheritance rights and shares. Damien was willing to give up the family fortune, but in the end, Lillian abandoned him and went abroad with a wealthy second-generation heir. He fell into depression for a full month and became a public joke. The marriage arrangement between our two families had been set long before I was born, but no one expected that I would choose Damien as my marriage partner. Everyone in the Martinez family looked like they had swallowed something unpleasant. Only the two people involved reacted differently, one calm, one shocked. After all, Damien was only the second son and far from as outstanding as his older brother Sean. But now, it was my decision, Paula's decision, and no one could object, including my father. Sean also had a girl he liked. My choice of Damien was, in a way, giving him an exit. He even smiled faintly and said thank you. As for Damien, he looked at me with a gaze that was almost dark and hostile. In a sense, both brothers were deeply emotional men. They could even give up inheritance rights for love. It made me look like the villain who broke apart two lovers. Damien and I's wedding proceeded as scheduled. In the end, he still compromised, because Lillian had gotten married overseas. On the wedding day, I smiled gracefully while he kept a dark expression, mechanically going through every step. He looked exactly like a groom forced into marriage, but none of the guests cared, or rather, they were used to it. Marriage alliances were simply the best way to maintain commercial ties between two families. Born into high society, most marriages were never matters of personal choice. Most children of elite families could not escape the fate of arranged marriage. I am the only heir of the Castillo family. If I were just a little more ruthless, I could have cancelled this engagement entirely. But thinking of that gentle-eyed young man, I unexpectedly felt a faint sense of anticipation. And yet, things had changed beyond recognition. From the very beginning, it was already a mistake. Chapter 4. A few days later, at the entrance of the company, Paula. The moment Luciano saw me, his eyes turned red. Why didn't you reply to my messages? Are you angry with me? He looked at me carefully, his long eyelashes trembling slightly. I scanned him from head to toe. He hadn't changed his clothes. They still carried the chill of early morning. There were faint dark circles under his eyes, and his usual bright black gaze had dimmed. Did you wait here all night? He lowered his eyes, his thick lashes casting a small shadow beneath them. I was afraid you'd be angry and never see me again. His voice was hoarse, filled with grievance. Suddenly, I was reminded of the first time I met him, the day Lillian returned to the country. Damien didn't come home all night. He vaguely said he had to work overtime, an excuse full of holes. But I didn't expose him. As usual, I smiled and said okay. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long time, so long that my heartbeat began to accelerate. A secret hope quietly formed in my chest. What was I hoping for? Hoping that his meeting with Lillian was just an innocent reunion. Hoping he wouldn't betray this marriage that was already fragile enough to break at a touch. Hoping that my place in his heart was enough for him to refuse temptation. Then came a short, sharp cry, Lillian's voice. The call was suddenly cut off, leaving only suffocating silence. Claude tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his voice filled with restrained anger. Miss, should we go up and catch them in the act? I didn't answer. I lit a cigarette, my gaze fixed on the brightly lit hotel. The car stayed parked downstairs all night. I don't know how many cigarettes burned between my fingers. The dark night gradually gave way to pale morning light, frost forming on the car window. But Damien never came out. I let out a self-mocking laugh, bitterness rising in my throat. Expectation only leads to disappointment. I knew that better than anyone. Didn't I? It was at that moment Luciano entered my line of sight. Claude rarely smiled in a mischievous way. Miss, don't you like playing raising someone up? That previous one is useless now, why not switch targets? Look, this kid is much better looking than Damien. I froze for a moment, then let out a ridiculous laugh, temporarily pushing aside the tangled thoughts in my mind. Claude, don't tease me. He looked at me disapprovingly, as if wanting to say more, but I cut him off. Let's go to the company. The moment the engine started, the beautiful boy desperately grabbed onto my car window. His fingertips were white from gripping too hard, and the corners of his eyes were red with anxiety. Yet his expression was stubborn. He held a bar flyer in his hand and looked at me almost pleadingly. See, could you sign up for a membership? His wet, glistening eyes were full of pain and resistance, yet he did not take a single step back. In the adult world, things don't need to be said too explicitly. Chapter 5. I let him in the car, and Claude wisely raised the partition. He hesitated for a long time. His lower lip was bitten so hard it had gone pale. But in the end, as if making up his mind, he opened the door. I looked at him with interest. How old are you? What's your name? 19. My name is Luciano. He clenched the wrinkled flyer tightly, keeping his head down. His ears were completely red. For some reason, I suddenly remembered something a friend once said. 18 is too young. 20 is too mature. 19 is just right. I looked at him for a moment and spoke slowly. You're in university, right? First time doing this kind of part-time job? Luciano lowered his head even further, his voice trembling with obvious shame. I need money, my grandmother is still in the hospital. Seeing that I didn't respond, he suddenly looked up at me. His dark eyes were even brimming with tears. Please, help me, I'll do anything. Claude coughed at the wrong moment, and Luciano's face instantly turned red all the way to his neck. I found it somewhat amusing. Let's go to the hospital. Got it, Claude replied cheerfully. Luciano's eyes slowly turned red. A faint, shimmering light gathered in them as he stared at me without blinking. He had grown up relying only on his grandmother, a top student. He was admitted to the music department of the Imperial Capital University, but his grandmother had always been in poor health, and he survived by working constant part-time jobs to pay for her medical expenses. Now she had suffered a sudden heart attack and needed surgery. Luciano had truly run out of options, which led him to choose this path, only to run into me. I paid all the medical fees for him and gave him the keys to an apartment under my name so he could stay there temporarily, a kind of investment. He was a sophomore in the music department of Imperial Capital University, a well-known piano prodigy. Whether in technique or talent, he was flawless. His future was undeniably limitless. He needed money, and I just happened to have plenty of it, so I might as well play the role of a patron. Chapter 6. From that day on, he sent me at least 10 messages every single day. Paula, I learned a new piece. Can I play it for you? Paula, Grandma is much better today. She said she wants to see you. Is that okay? Paula, the orange cat downstairs at the hospital just had a litter of kittens. Do you want to come see them? Paula, that cheating scumbag isn't a good person. You deserve someone younger, more outstanding. Shy emoji. I didn't know what Claude had told him, but every day he tried in different ways to persuade me to divorce. Even the best patience was starting to wear thin. Facing this overly talkative kid in front of me, all I felt was helplessness. I'm not angry. Go back and rest. Luciano looked up, his narrow eyes curving into a smile, but his lips were pale, and fine sweat had started to form at his temples, as if he was enduring some kind of pain. What's wrong with you? He pressed a hand to his abdomen. Just a bit of stomach pain. An old issue. Don't worry about me, Paula. Is that so? I have medicine in my office. Looks like you don't need. I'm going. Luciano's voice suddenly rose, his eyes unable to hide his excitement. Even I found myself infected by his mood and couldn't help the faint curve of my lips. After we got to the office, I had my assistant go buy some food. Luciano's smile never faded. Thank you, Paula. He acted completely unrestrained, sprawled lazily on the sofa as if my office were his own home. It even made my assistant glance back and forth between us with obvious gossip-filled curiosity. Just as I was about to remind him to behave properly, the door was suddenly slammed open. Paula, why did you transfer your shares to Sean? You clearly knew. When he saw Luciano, he immediately fell silent, his gaze turning cold and sharp. Who is this? The assistant, who had come in to deliver breakfast, quietly placed the food down and, before leaving, thoughtfully closed the door. Luciano looked relaxed and insolent, his beautiful peach blossom eyes full of disdain. This uncle, what does it have to do with you who I am? There wasn't a trace of the obedient behavior he showed in front of me. Damien stared at him, his thin lips pressed tightly together, the air between them quickly filled with the scent of gunpowder. I spoke slowly. Damien, since you transferred the shares to me, I should have the right to decide how to use them, right? And besides, I smiled lightly. I think your brother is more suitable to cooperate with me than you. The shares Damien transferred to me were later sold by me to Sean at a low price, giving him a favor in return. The cooperation between the Castillo family and the Martinez family would only become more stable. This was, in fact, the most expected outcome, but it also sent a clear signal. Damien had been completely discarded. His brows tightened, his lips pressed into a hard line, and anger burned unmistakably in his eyes. After a few seconds, he suddenly laughed. I thought this was just an arranged marriage, but now I get it, you like me, don't you? He stepped closer. Because I don't love you. You're using this to take revenge on me? My expression remained calm, but my heart suddenly tightened, making it hard to breathe. Damien's eyes flickered with malicious amusement. His face was dark, but the corner of his mouth curved slightly. Then let me tell you this, I'd rather die than love you. You are the most vile kind of person. You will never deserve anyone's love. He stared into my eyes, trying to find even the slightest trace of pain. A suffocating pressure spread through my body. My hidden hand under the desk trembled slightly. Luciano, who had been silent until now, suddenly rushed forward and punched Damien hard in the face. Damien staggered back, clutching his eye, staring at him in disbelief. Luciano's hand veins bulged, his eyes dark and heavy in a way I had never seen before. What do you even know? Paula is the best person in the world. She deserves the best love this world has to offer. Only someone blind like you would mistake glass for jewels and ignore the brilliance of a real gem. You deserve to end up with nothing. I stared at Luciano in a slight daze. Yet my emotions strangely settled. Damien, as if provoked beyond reason, lunged forward again, trying to hit Luciano. What right do you have to talk to me like that? Paula's little lover? I'm her legal husband. Luciano froze, a faint blush suddenly spreading across his face. He murmured, a little lover? I felt a wave of absurdity. The ferocity in him vanished instantly, and he didn't even fight back, he simply took the punch. The assistant quickly brought in security to separate them. When their eyes met mine, they immediately looked away, pretending nothing had happened. Chapter 7. I was speechless. Damien, with red-rimmed eyes, demanded to know what Luciano and I were. As you can see, Luciano, my little lover. I smiled and pulled Luciano behind me. He kept his head down, too embarrassed to look at me. His face flushed all the way to his neck. You're lying to me, aren't you? Damien froze in place, staring at me in disbelief, his voice trembling slightly. I didn't respond and simply walked away with Luciano. In the car, Luciano kept hesitating, as if his mind were running wild with guesses. His face was red like a boiled shrimp. Paula, what you said just now, what did you mean? I held the steering wheel and didn't look at him. Thanks for helping me out just now. That was just to deal with Damien, it doesn't mean anything else. He instantly deflated, his voice dull. Oh. I see. Do you remember what you promised me at the hospital? Yes. I'll stand at the top and repay you properly. I'll wait. Oh. He suddenly looked up, stunned, and the light in his eyes gradually brightened. I couldn't help but laugh and flicked his forehead. When you reach the top, then repay me. How about that? Most things between adults are understood without being said. He blushed, but still childishly hooked his pinky finger out, asking for a promise seal. Deal. I followed his lead and hooked my finger around his warm one. Finally, he broke into a smile, his eyes sparkling like scattered stars. Just switching the raising game to a different main character. I could afford to play. I brought Luciano to an auction. Unexpectedly, Damien was there too, with Lillian. She clung tightly to Damien's arm, watching me with visible vigilance, as if she were deeply wary of me. Damien stared at me and Luciano with a dark expression. He deliberately wrapped his arm around Lillian's waist, leaned close to her ear, and said something. He smiled in a suggestive way that made Lillian blush and lightly punch him. He pulled her into his arms, then shot me a provocative glance. Spring has come, stray dogs start barking everywhere. Luciano gritted his teeth, clearly furious. I calmly looked at Damien's childish display. The image of that young boy in my memory gradually blurred, like stagnant water that would never ripple again. I gave him a polite smile and looked away. From this moment on, Damien would no longer occupy even the slightest space in my heart. He froze in place, like a child unsure of what to do. After the auction began, Damien seemed determined to compete with me. Whatever I bid on, he would immediately raise the price. He made sure his presence was felt at all times. Luciano's expression darkened so much it looked like ink could drip from it. His lips tightly pressed, his sharp jawline even more defined. Paula, why is that scumbag acting like such a copycat? No taste at all. I looked at him amused. Why are you getting so worked up? You're just a kid. If he wants it, let him have it. We won't lose anything. There was nothing in this auction I particularly wanted anyway. It was just to show courtesy to the organizers. Since Damien wanted to play the fool with money, I might as well let him. Luciano gave me a resentful look but said nothing more. Damien kept staring in our direction, not even noticing that Lillian's expression had already turned unpleasant. The final item was an exceptionally fine jade bracelet. Luciano, who had been chattering earlier, suddenly fell silent, staring fixedly at the bracelet on the tray. What's wrong? You like it? He lowered his eyes. This was my grandfather's engagement gift to my grandmother. The files Claude gave me mentioned that Luciano's family was once an aristocratic household, though they later fell into decline. This jade bracelet should have been one of the items they had to sell off back then. I nodded and raised my bidding paddle first after placing my offer. Luciano turned toward me abruptly, his dark eyes reflecting a trembling light. Paula, you don't have to. I looked at him seriously, my tone gentle. You can earn this money back in the future, but the value of this bracelet can't be measured in money, you understand that, don't you? His eyes instantly turned red, and he nodded with a choked breath. I understand, thank you. Chapter 8. As expected, Damien kept competing with me. I no longer backed down and kept raising the price. In the end, only the two of us were left battling it out. Lillian's face turned deeply uncomfortable. She tugged at Damien's sleeve through gritted teeth, but he acted as if he didn't notice, his gaze dark and unreadable as he stared fixedly at me. I let out a cold laugh and directly raised the bid to 10 million. Sorry, what I lack the most is money. The entire hall erupted in shock. Damien gave a self-mocking curl of his lips, and a faint trace of sorrow flashed through his eyes for a moment. The auctioneer beamed and struck the gavel heavily. After the auction ended, the jade bracelet was handed over to Luciano. Return it to its rightful owner. He smiled mischievously. I can't take it. My grandmother would beat me to death. Whoever bought it should give it. In the distance, Damien's figure began walking toward us. I immediately got into the car. Luciano, who had been full of momentum a moment ago, reluctantly followed. Why are we leaving? He's coming right over. I was just about to curse him out. I glanced at him, the corners of my lips lifting into an unreadable smile. For someone who's your little lover, you're pretty bold. At least he's still the legal husband. Aren't you afraid this ends up on the news? His face turned completely red, but he still stubbornly lifted his chin. You just refuse to admit it. Why are you even afraid of him? I'm not afraid. Luciano fell silent, speechless. Luciano's grandmother, though already silver-haired, was still elegant and composed, always smiling gently. The surgery had gone very successfully, and her complexion had regained a healthy rosy glow. I handed her the box in my hands, still thinking of what excuse to use to persuade her to accept it. But the moment she opened it, her eyes gradually turned red. I thought I would never see this again in my lifetime. Luciano's grandmother looked up at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. Miss Castillo, I won't refuse. This jade bracelet holds deep meaning for me. I quietly let out a breath of relief. However, she then changed the subject. To show my gratitude, why don't I give Luciano to you instead? The smile I had just formed froze instantly. Don't be fooled by his age, he knows how to take care of people. And he looks decent enough too. She clicked her tongue, though not as handsome as his grandfather. Grandma, don't compare people like that. Luciano exploded like a startled cat, his gaze flickering wildly. Still too embarrassed to look at me, his face already red enough to drip blood. The words I was about to say got turned around, and I smiled slightly. All right, I'll take good care of him. Luciano's grandmother smiled meaningfully. Then I can rest assured. Luciano kept his neck stiff, refusing to lift his head, not daring to say a single word. The hospital room was filled with a warm, peaceful atmosphere. Even I unconsciously softened my expression. Perhaps this was exactly why Luciano, despite all the hardships he had endured, was still able to remain so resilient and optimistic. Chapter 9. The company entered a particularly busy period with several projects. I spent several consecutive days sleeping at the office. Damien called me a few times, but I declined every one of them. There was no need to maintain contact with this plastic husband anymore. There was a document at home that I needed to pick up. While driving, Claude happily reported Damian Martinez's recent situation like it was entertainment news. Sean Martinez had acquired some scattered shares, and together with the shares I had transferred to him, he was now the rightful controller of the Martinez family. This was all part of the Martinez family's deliberate allowance. Damian was gradually being pushed to the margins, but he had never really wanted to take over the Martinez family anyway, and now that he had reunited with his true love and achieved reconciliation, he had what he wanted. In that sense, he should probably be thanking me. Claude smiled mysteriously. He's been staying in the living room late these past few days, always looking toward the door. He's probably waiting for you. Miss. I didn't even look up. Claude, what kind of novels have you been reading lately? Cold wife comes home, love her deeply. My hand on the documents paused abruptly. Claude averted his gaze guiltily. Claude, maybe I'll give you 2 days off. Go on a trip with Aunt Lee. I'll cover it. I couldn't let him keep reading this nonsense. Miss, please don't. I smiled faintly, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. Go. All right. It was already 10 at night when I got home. I didn't expect Damian to actually be there. He sat on the sofa like a stone sculpture, his eyes lighting up slightly when he saw me enter. Did you forget our agreement? He asked in a dull voice. I took off my heels, massaged my sore muscles, and didn't even spare him a glance. Didn't we agree to mutual non-interference? Or have you developed amnesia? He touched the bridge of his nose, choked into silence by my words. Lucky ran over and affectionately rubbed against my palm. It was the cat Damian had once saved. Back then, this emotionless marriage had been a compromise that stripped Damian of his dignity. On our wedding night, Damian's refined features were filled with deep disgust and helplessness. He didn't even look at me, walking straight toward the door. I stopped him. Where are you going? It's just a marriage alliance. You don't actually expect me to stay here tonight, do you? He tilted his head slightly, a mocking curve appearing on his lips. Under the cold light, his features looked even sharper and more distant. I suddenly smiled. On our wedding night, my husband going out to fool around, do you want me to become a laughingstock? Damian stopped, then turned and walked toward me. His dark eyes carried a faint, malicious glint. You want me to stay? He leaned down slightly, pressing his hands against the sofa behind me. His gentle voice brushed past my ear like a feather, warm, tingling, but laced with undisguised mockery. Then beg me. I said nothing. He turned and left, as if even looking at me was a burden. The next day after the wedding, Claude smiled kindly. Miss, happy wedding. You finally got what you wanted. Thinking of Damian's disgusted gaze, I lowered my eyes and gave a soft mem. Claude glanced at the cold dishes on the table. The sweet and sour pork ribs and steamed cauliflower placed in the center looked especially glaring. He sighed. Why don't you just say it directly? Claude didn't understand. Damian hated me to the core. If someone else had done these things, to him it would have been kindness. But if it was me, he would only feel more terrified that someone so dark had been watching him since middle school. For someone who doesn't love you, everything you do is just self-indulgence. Just like my mother, who took her own life for love. It was clearly a marriage of mutual benefit. Yet she fell in love with a man who had mistresses everywhere. Her tragic life was already destined. Once my thoughts settled, I smiled and picked up a completely cold piece of sweet and sour pork. Claude, we still have a long time with him. Let's take it slow. Chapter 10. Unexpectedly, Damian brought that kitten back. The once thin and fragile little life had grown into a round, chubby cat pig. I'm going to keep it. You have no objections, right? He said coldly and awkwardly. I curved my lips. What's its name? When it came to this cat, his tone softened slightly. Lucky. Peace in all seasons. Good fortune always. Lucky. When he said this, his eyes carried a faint, gentle warmth. I froze slightly. Lucky was the name I had given it. Back then, Claude was worried Damian might misunderstand and think the cat had been adopted by someone else. So he left him a message. Claude had asked me if I wanted to name it. I had said casually, then call it Lucky. I hope it stays safe and lucky in all its days. So he had kept that casual name. I smiled calmly and bent down to gently rub Lucky's head. You can keep it. From now on, you come home for dinner every day, and after eating, you walk with me. Lucky surprisingly took a liking to me, constantly rubbing against my hand, exactly like the first time we met. Damien looked at the scene, a hint of surprise flashing in his dark eyes. He studied me for a moment, his brows slightly furrowed, then slowly relaxed as if making some decision. Fine. From that day on, no matter how busy we were, we always had dinner together. I had the chef prepare those same 2 dishes every day, making sure they tasted exactly like the ones from the cafeteria. He paused slightly, as if about to ask something, then swallowed the words back down. Day after day, our relationship quietly began to shift in ways neither of us noticed. I picked Lucky up. Damien's expression softened, and an unconscious smile appeared at the corner of his lips. It felt like we had returned to an ordinary night a few months ago. I was walking upstairs when Damien called out to me, his voice urgent. He lowered his eyes, his refined face showing a trace of confusion and grievance. We haven't played basketball in a long time, and you haven't brought me soup for a long time either. My fingers trembled slightly. A wave of irritation rose in my chest, and I suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge to smoke. My memory jumped back to the day when the sunset painted the sky crimson. After dinner, Damien had asked where we would go for a walk. By then, he had already grown used to this life for 2. I changed into sportswear. We're not going for a walk today. We're doing something different. Damien pressed his thin lips together and followed me out obediently. When we arrived at the basketball court, surprise and delight flashed through his eyes. He looked at me in a daze. I made a clean 3-point shot, then smiled and invited him. Want to play? His eyelashes trembled slightly. The sunset blurred his features as he slowly walked toward me. Bathed in golden light, Damien quickly realized my skill was in no way inferior to his. The game gradually became serious. An hour later, we sat under the hoop, both slightly out of breath. When did you learn basketball? He asked. I took a sip of water. The liquid slid down my neck. He stared at me, his eyes darkening, his Adam's apple rolling slightly. Probably in middle school, I replied. After learning that Damien liked basketball, I had Claude secretly enroll me in a training class. I squeezed out time every day from my packed schedule to practice. The coach praised my dedication and said I had talent. I didn't explain. I didn't like basketball. It was just forget it. Let's just say I liked it. He stood up and held out his hand, looking straight ahead without meeting my eyes. You're a good opponent. Let's play again next time. I rarely froze for a moment, looking at his pale hand and the faint redness on his ears. Something ambiguous quietly began to grow between us. My lips lifted unconsciously, not a perfect smile, but a genuine one. I took his hand, and we walked side by side for a long time. Our shadows stretched under the sunset until they overlapped. Damien had grown used to a life with me in it. Claude said he would come home early from work and unconsciously look for my figure. When he worked late and didn't return, the servants said he would lose his appetite eating alone. Damien had a stomach condition. Every day, I had people send him nourishing soup. I kept emergency medicine prepared at all times. Even though he once hated me to the bone, he had now become used to my presence. Habit is a terrifying thing. It can destroy everything, and it can also heal everything. I had thought what I brought him would be the latter, but before I could test the result, Lillian returned to the country, and all those promises turned into a joke. Chapter 11. These memories kept reminding me how foolish and naive I had once been. I had actually developed the illusion that Damien was slowly beginning to like me. Damien had run through almost my entire youth. He was the only color in it. Those scenes replayed in my mind like a slideshow. Over and over again, I shut my eyes hard, slicing through that tangled mess of emotions in one clean cut. Paula, never cling to what I can let go of. Sorry, I said distantly, looking at him. I'm busy. You can do these things with someone else. The light in Damien's eyes of hope slowly dimmed. There would no longer be any trace of him in my eyes. After that day, Damien never came back again. I sent Claude off on a trip, and for once, there was peace and quiet around me. After Luciano's grandmother was discharged, Luciano turned into an overworked machine, staying in the practice room until very late every day. The frequency of his messages to me decreased a lot, but his talkative, slightly clingy image still surfaced in my mind from time to time, and even the exhaustion of the day seemed to fade away because of it. As I was preparing to leave the office, a call came in. Su Qingqiu, one of the most renowned pianists in the world, and also the teacher I had previously recommended to Luciano. Everyone in the circle knew that old Master Su was strict and old-fashioned. No amount of wealth or power could move him. He only valued talent, and thus had very few students. Each one of them, however, was a nationally or internationally recognized musician. I had only been able to secure Luciano an introduction because of my connection with his granddaughter. Unexpectedly, within less than a cup of tea's time, the stern and reluctant old master had turned cheerful and delighted. He looked at Luciano with extreme satisfaction and immediately had him drink the apprenticeship tea. The moment I picked up the call, I was met with a storm of accusations. "Miss Castillo, I worked hard to secure Luciano an opportunity to study abroad, something countless people would kill for, and he actually rejected it. What is going on?" Old Master Su's voice was thunderous, so loud it nearly made my eardrums ache. I had to hold the phone slightly away. He never showed anyone respect, not even me as the head of the Castillo family. I pressed my lips together and tried to calm him down. "Please don't be anxious, Old Master Su. He might just be worried about his grandmother's health. I'll ask him about it later." There was a brief silence on the other end before his voice deepened. "This child hasn't had it easy, but this opportunity, if he misses it, it will be very hard to get another. You must persuade him properly. And besides, aren't you his partner? It shouldn't be so hard for his family to help take care of things, right?" I stiffened slightly. "You've misunderstood. I'm not." "What do you mean not?" "Luciano lights up every time he talks about you. Don't you dare deceive my precious student's feelings. I know your wealthy families like to play around, but he's even willing to become the third party for love. What more do you want?" After being shouted at like that, it almost sounded like I was guilty even if I wasn't. A faint trace of guilt rose in me for a rare moment. I covered my face and replied weakly, "Yes, I'll talk to him properly." "Humph. That's more like it." He hung up the phone with a sharp click. Chapter 12. I gave up and drove to find Luciano, only to discover him squatting downstairs of the company building. His eyes kept darting away, both hands awkwardly placed, like a puppy that had done something wrong. All the questions I had prepared instantly dissolved. I walked up to him and looked down at him expressionlessly. "Why didn't you go abroad?" His voice was low and hoarse, filled with grievance. "I was afraid you'd run off with some other man." I was confused. Why was everyone questioning my moral integrity? Did I really look that much like a scumbag? Even someone as composed as me couldn't help but find it absurd. He looked up at me. The streetlight flickered in his eyes, making him look obedient and pitiful. "Because Claude said you only married him because you liked that scumbag. I was afraid that if I went abroad, he'd steal you away while I wasn't here." I was stunned into silence by this earth-shattering logic. From a certain angle, wasn't he the one doing the stealing here? He was the one trying to push me toward divorce every single day. I let out a laugh of disbelief. "Kid, do I really seem that untrustworthy to you?" Luciano immediately said, "No." Then he gave up completely, shutting his eyes and shouting, "I just don't have a sense of security." The air froze for a few seconds. I said calmly, "If you miss this opportunity, then our agreement doesn't count anymore." Then I turned to leave. He rushed forward and wrapped his arms tightly around my waist. His chaotic, warm breath brushed against my ear in uneven waves. My body stiffened instinctively. A burning tear slipped onto my neck. His voice was hoarse and broken. "I'll go. Don't abandon me." My heartbeat skipped. My breathing quickened in a way I could no longer ignore. "Who cries like a man all the time? Before you leave, I'll take you out to have some fun, all right?" I coaxed him gently, my voice slightly hoarse. Luciano's face turned red again, and he lowered his head, too embarrassed to meet my eyes. You promised." This time, I took the initiative to hook my pinky finger with his and sealed the promise seriously. Chapter 13. I pushed aside all non-urgent work and handed it to my assistant. I took Luciano to concerts, watched sunsets, felt the sea breeze, fed pigeons. Like an ordinary couple, we took photos and wandered everywhere. Throughout the entire trip, Luciano never stopped smiling. But the journey still had to end early. It was Martinez's grandpa's birthday. As the nominal daughter-in-law of the Martinez family, I had to attend. When Luciano found out I would be going with Damien, he sulked on the plane the entire time, turning his head toward the window and refusing to speak to me. Damien was already waiting at home. The moment he saw Luciano, his brows tightened and anger flashed in his eyes. "You actually brought him here?" Luciano immediately lowered his eyes, lips pressed together pitifully, completely different from his usual rebellious self. "Sorry, bro, it's hard to get a taxi here. I just asked Paula to drop me off." My eyelid twitched. That level of tea was almost overflowing. Damien was so angry he couldn't speak. After not seeing him for a while, he looked much more exhausted. Dark circles clearly visible under his eyes. His chest rose and fell heavily, eyes red, his whole body radiating a sense of collapse. I walked past him and went upstairs to change. Downstairs, Luciano instantly switched demeanor. Sitting lazily on the sofa, Claude stood nearby, looking at him with fatherly affection. Damien clenched his fists. "A mistress like you still dares to show up in this house?" Luciano leaned back casually, a mocking smile on his lips. "You can bring your mistress too. Paula won't care. After all, the more the merrier." "You bastard!" Damien suddenly rushed forward and punched Luciano. Luciano immediately fought back, and the two of them ended up brawling. The maid screamed. Claude saw things getting out of hand and stepped in half-heartedly to break them up. But Luciano's right hand was suddenly slammed hard onto the coffee table. Glass shattered instantly, and blood mixed with shards of glass ran down his arm. He clutched his wrist in pain, face pale, cold sweat pouring down. This was the scene I saw when I came downstairs. My mind went blank for a second. I almost couldn't keep my expression steady. "Claude, take him to the hospital." Damien stood frozen among the chaos. Blood smeared on his temple, his expression dazed and lost. For the first time, I lost my temper at him, my voice cold as ice. "If anything happens to him, you'll regret it." Luciano's tears fell instantly. "Paula, will I never be able to play the piano again?" I soothed him softly. "Don't be afraid. I won't let anything happen to you." We quickly left together. Damien stood rigid in the ruined living room, his thin lips trembling uncontrollably. He stared at the direction of the door, slowly turning red-eyed. Chapter 14. Luciano's hand was fortunately only a minor external injury, nothing serious involving the bones or tendons. He gave me a weak smile. "Paula, don't worry about me. I'm fine." I said nothing, just looked at him quietly. "Paula, what's wrong?" The curve of his lips slowly stiffened. My expression turned cold. "Luciano, was it fun?" I took out a cigarette and put it to my lips, only to realize this was a hospital. Irritated, I threw it into the trash instead. His gaze flickered, his voice dropped. "Paula, what do you mean? You provoked Damien, made him hurt you on purpose, then played the victim afterward. Do you really take me for a fool?" All the color drained from his face, his lips parted slightly, but no words came out. A surge of anger was tightly suppressed inside me, burning through my entire body in dull pain. Have you ever thought about what would happen if your hand was truly ruined? How would you play piano? What about your dream? I slammed my bag into him. He didn't dodge, didn't even blink. My chest rose and fell violently. My emotions slipped out of control, and inevitably, I thought of that terrifying cold night. The wind was bone-chilling. My mother stood in a bright red dress in front of the huge window, dancing. When the music ended, she looked at me through tears. "What's the point of having you? You can't even keep your father. Even if I die, I will leave a deep mark in his heart." She laughed like a madwoman and jumped right in front of me. The red dress fluttered violently in the air. I couldn't catch her. She wanted to use her death to make my father regret her. But she was disappointed. That man only shed a few hypocritical tears, then went on openly keeping mistresses, one illegitimate child after another. That red dress was eventually buried under snow, never making a sound again. I looked at Luciano coldly, my voice devoid of warmth. "If you don't even love yourself, why would anyone else love you?" I turned and left. Luciano didn't say another word. Chapter 15. It was the Martinez family patriarch's birthday banquet. I linked arms with a stiff Damien. I spoke to the guests gracefully and calmly. Everyone there knew Damien and I were not on good terms. Yet we still smiled flawlessly in public. All of them were old foxes in the business world. Some even smiled and praised us for being a loving couple. My smile nearly broke. Instead, Damien suddenly wrapped his arm around my shoulder. "Thank you for the compliment." The guest awkwardly laughed and quickly excused himself. A faint scent of perfume lingered on him, making me uncomfortable. Perfume making is one of my hobbies, so I am extremely sensitive to scents. It was the same perfume Lillian wore at the auction. I subtly pushed him away. Damien's expression darkened. He forced a faint smile and slowly withdrew his hand. After we returned home, just as I was about to get out of the car, Damien suddenly pulled me into his arms from behind. His breathing was uneven, and a faint smell of alcohol brushed against my ear. "Paula, don't be with him, okay?" His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. "I think I've gotten used to a life with you, eating together, walking together, playing basketball together. I don't even know when it started, but just thinking about you being at home after work gives me motivation. You know what I like. You prepare stomach medicine for me. You fit into my life so well that everything around me has traces of you. I think I might really have fallen in love with you." His tone was confused and aggrieved. My heart jolted violently. A scene I once only dreamed of had now become reality. If it were before, I might have been happy. But now, there was only disgust and irritation. He should have understood long ago, since the moment he cheated. There was no us anymore. I, Paula, would never take back a wandering man. It was dirty. I looked at him coldly. "What about your true love, Lillian? You were so madly in love with her before, now you let go just like that?" Damien froze. The light in his eyes slowly faded. His tightening grip loosened. I got out of the car, turned back, and smiled brightly at him. "I know Lillian is pregnant. I'll make way for you too. Let's divorce. I'll clear a place for my little lover." Damien stared at me blankly, half his face swallowed by the car's shadow, gray, broken, and ruined. A tear slowly fell from the corner of his eye, and I walked toward the hospital under the bright streetlights. Tonight, I missed him more than usual. Chapter 16. The doctor told me Luciano had come down with a high fever. I gently pushed open the ward door. Moonlight fell across his refined, delicate features, making him look slightly unreal. Beads of sweat formed at his temples, his brows tightly furrowed as if trapped in a terrible nightmare. I reached out and touched his forehead. It was burning. His damp hair clung to his skin, soaked through with cold sweat. His pale lips moved faintly, letting out a weak sound. I leaned closer to listen. He was saying, "Paula, don't leave me. I was wrong. I won't ever do it again." The same broken, repeated words, fragmented and restrained. It felt like being pricked by needles. A faint but dense pain spread through my chest. It was almost funny. Every time I lost control of my emotions, it was because of Luciano. I knew very clearly that my feelings for him had already changed without me noticing. At first it was appreciation, then pity, until eventually I found myself slowly infected by him, feeling my heart begin to beat vividly again. Maybe I should be brave one more time. Under the moonlight, my fingertips traced his features carefully. His long lashes trembled slightly, and his throat moved unconsciously, as if possessed. I kissed him. Our warm breaths tangled instantly, inseparable. Just as I was about to pull away, he opened his eyes, suddenly gripping the back of my neck and deepening the kiss in response. At the peak of emotion, Luciano shed tears. His voice was hoarse, his misty black eyes reflecting the moonlight, bright and shimmering. "Paula, is this a dream?" My expression softened. "It's not a dream. I'm here with you." "Paula!" he cried instantly, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. Don't leave me." He held my hand tightly, not giving me any chance to pull away. "I'm not going anywhere. Go to sleep. I'll stay here with you." He said nothing more, just kept staring at me, afraid I might disappear like an illusion. Helpless, I lay down beside him. The distance between us was almost non-existent. His breathing was hot and heavy, his eyes still filled with disbelief. "If you don't sleep, I'm leaving." Luciano immediately closed his eyes, still clutching my hand tightly. I didn't pull away, letting him hold me. Under the moonlight, I slowly traced his features with my gaze, smoothing the faint crease between his brows. His breathing gradually became steady and long. Luciano, have a good dream. We still have a very long time ahead. Chapter 17. After he went abroad, I moved in with Luciano's grandmother. The divorce matters were fully handled by lawyers. Luciano's grandmother not only didn't resist hiring a caregiver, she even joked with me about it. I didn't expect I'd live to enjoy such a luxurious life. This is nice. From now on, Luciano and I will be on different levels. You can dump him, but you can't dump me. Relieved. I also felt a little helpless. She had the calmness of someone who had seen everything in life. Yet she was also constantly online, acting like a humorous internet-savvy old lady. Even though I wasn't good at dealing with elders, being with her always made me feel at ease. In her presence, I felt a long-lost sense of family warmth. The bloodied wound inside my heart seemed to be slowly healing. I never expected to see Damien again in this way. He broke into my office and slammed the door open. His chin was covered in stubble, his eyes bloodshot, murky and exhausted. In less than a month, he had become so haggard it looked like a gust of wind could blow him away. Mr. Martinez, do you not know how to knock? I removed my glasses, my gentle voice carrying a hint of impatience. Because his eyes instantly turned red. His lips trembled. You refuse to see me. We don't seem to have any reason to meet. There is. He hurriedly searched his pockets, his gaze never leaving me, staring almost hungrily. When he pulled out the cat-shaped keychain, my breath briefly stopped. I saw this in the glass cabinet in your room. His fingers trembled violently, his voice hoarse beyond repair. It was you, wasn't it? You were the one who saved Lucky back then, right? I should have realized sooner. It's so wary of strangers, but it's so attached to you. I had asked Claude to prepare 2 keys back then, one of which was hung next to the cat house. Who would have thought Claude, in his mischievousness, had even bought a pair of matching keychains? He called them love tokens. I finally understand now why the cafeteria lady knew what dishes I liked. Why the guards would open the door for me. It was all arranged by you, wasn't it? Sean said my father had already planned to abandon me. You married me only to help me, didn't you? He pressed the questions urgently, like a drowning man desperately grasping for a lifeline. My throat suddenly went dry. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. A secret I thought would be buried forever had been exposed in this way. Like a stone sinking into a lake, only a faint ripple. Gone almost instantly. So what if it is? Or isn't? It's all insignificant anyway. Damien stared at me in a daze, then suddenly broke down completely. Tears fell without warning. Insignificant? You call it insignificant? Then what about the time you risked your life to save me? Was that also insignificant? He roared in despair, like a trapped beast with nowhere left to go. My heart was suddenly seized by a large hand, and the air around me grew thin in an instant. Chapter 18. It was a suffocating and shameful memory. The school organized a field trip for the entire grade. Through the bus window, I saw Damien. He didn't fit in with the others. He bypassed the crowd and went alone into the depths of the forest. A girl nearby complained about the mosquitoes. I noticed her arms were covered in dense bite marks. I lent her a perfume I had formulated myself. It also had mosquito-repelling properties. She thanked me gratefully. That girl was Lillian. Then, without warning, a heavy rain poured down. The teachers immediately ordered everyone to return to the buses, and no one noticed that Damien had not come back. I informed the teacher and ran straight into the forest. Damien's phone could not be reached. A bad premonition kept growing stronger. Ahead, a landslide had actually occurred. I trembled as I called Claude, but I no longer cared about the rain. I threw away my umbrella and staggered forward. My calves were cut open by sharp stones, but I felt nothing. I kept shouting Damien's name over and over again. Finally, near a slope buried in mud and rocks, I heard a faint cry for help. My heart shot up into my throat. Without any tools, I used both hands to desperately dig through the soil and debris. When I finally saw Damien, he was already half-conscious, pale-faced. Blood mixed on his temple. I struggled to pull him out, and just as I was about to call emergency services, I saw the rescue team in the distance. The tension that had been holding me up finally collapsed. I quietly went around the other side and left. After I got home, I developed a high fever and fell unconscious. When I woke up, I was locked in the confinement room by my grandfather and made to kneel for several days. The future heir of the Castillo family had actually risked her life for a completely unrelated man. My grandfather struck me hard with his cane, looking at me with disappointment and rage. Your mother was a woman consumed by love. So foolish she died for a man. Do you want to follow in her footsteps? Do you know how many illegitimate children your father has waiting to replace you? The moment you make a mistake, there are plenty of people ready to take your place. Once this gets out, everyone will know your weakness is that man. Do you think you'll end up well? You'll be torn apart alive. Don't you understand something so simple? I'm so disappointed in you. Of course I understood. That was why I could never let anyone know I liked Damien. Only by having nothing to do with each other could we both remain safe. I knelt and begged my grandfather, the pain from my countless wounds sinking deep into my heart. It felt like I was once again seeing my powerless, helpless younger self. I won't let anyone know. Please give me one more chance. Grandfather, I will become the perfect heir. He leaned on his cane and stared at me for a long time. Finally, he sighed and left without looking back. When I returned to school again, Damien had already started circling around Lillian. I saw him gently feeding her ice cream, his eyes filled with unmistakable affection. The sunlight was too bright, and my eyes stung uncontrollably. That incident became a secret forever buried. I was forced to study abroad, and I never had any further contact with Damien. Until I officially returned home to take over the Castillo family, Damien and Lillian had already broken up. Back and forth. I thought this was fate, so I held on tightly. But in the end, it was nothing more than my own obsession. Chapter 19. Damien tremblingly pulled out that bottle of perfume. This is the scent I smelled back then. Lillian came over with the rescue team. I thought she was the one who saved me. His voice was hoarse and broken. Tears fell like a broken string of beads. He had completely collapsed, leaving only pain and unwillingness in his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Why? I took a deep breath. It's in the past. There's nothing to talk about. No wonder Lillian always looked at me with guarded avoidance. No wonder Damien suddenly fell in love with Lillian, someone he had no real connection with. So she had taken advantage of the mistake and stolen someone else's credit. The past? And you tell me to just move past it? You did so much for me and said nothing. Do you think that makes you noble? His eyes were blood red. His jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his neck bulged violently. Or what are you? The high and mighty Castillo heiress? Just treating me like some toy for your amusement? Pick me up when you're interested. Throw me away when you're bored. He suddenly rushed forward, gripping my shoulders tightly, his knuckles white. Paula, do you even have a heart? Every word he spoke was shattered and desperate. His eyes drowned in gray despair. I let out a cold laugh and slapped him hard across the face. Then what do you want to hear? That I got a high fever from saving you and was punished to kneel for 5 days? That when I returned to school, I saw you happily spending time with Lillian? Or that on the day she came back, I waited outside your hotel until dawn? Damien staggered, his thin frame on the verge of collapse. His eyes were filled with disbelief and unspeakable fear. I gave a mocking smile. Damien, do you deserve any of it? You fall in love with whoever saves you. Why don't you go love the rescue team? Or the hospital? You're absurdly hopeless. You were already married. And yet you still chose to cheat without a shred of morality. Disgusting and shameless. You got the person wrong. You made the wrong choices. And now you still have the nerve to blame me? Whether it's me or Lillian, you're nothing but a coward who refuses to take responsibility. With every word I spoke, the color drained further from his face until he could barely stand. Please go handle the divorce paperwork. You've dragged this out for 2 months already. I don't have time to play with you. Damien's pupils lost focus. His face turned pale and numb. He turned away, pressing trembling fingers against his eyes, and suddenly let out a hoarse laugh. Fine, as you wish. Chapter 20. As soon as my father heard about the divorce, he stormed over to confront me in anger. You were the one who insisted on marrying the Martinez second son, and now you divorce just like that? Where are you putting the Castillo family's dignity? I sat calmly on the sofa, casually picked up a finance magazine, and replied unhurriedly, "Don't worry, it won't affect the cooperation between the Castillo and Martinez families. You ungrateful brat, have you grown wings now? I looked up slowly at the middle-aged man in front of me, his face contorted with rage. After years indulging in alcohol and lust, his body had already deteriorated severely. He relied on expensive imported medication just to maintain a normal life. Yet he still made no effort to restrain himself, continuing to frequent various pleasure clubs. The disgust in my eyes was almost impossible to hide. Since I was born, he had never fulfilled even a single duty as a father. Instead, he spent his time plotting with his illegitimate children to push me out of the Castillo inheritance, even wishing for my downfall. In this family, I had never experienced anything like parental love. What surrounded me was always schemes, control, pressure, and expectation. Looking at his flushed face, I slowly smiled. Father, with all your scandals making headlines over the years, when it comes to shame, your daughter really can't compare. With illegitimate children coming in batches, people are even asking you for fertility tips. You're truly making the Castillo family proud. His eyes widened, his face twitching violently, clearly not expecting his once obedient daughter to talk back. Who allowed you to speak to me like that? Have you lost your mind? His hand shot up to strike me. I stood up and caught his wrist tightly, stopping it completely. You ungrateful. He trembled with rage. I easily pushed him away, then wiped my hand with a handkerchief in disgust, my gaze ice cold. It seems you still don't understand who's in charge of the Castillo family now. If you keep making moves behind the scenes, I can't guarantee you'll continue enjoying your current luxurious life. I won't give any benefits to your illegitimate children. You should focus on living a few more years and saving up a dowry for your precious sons. His expression looked as if he wanted to tear me apart and swallow me whole, but beneath it, I saw deep fear and hesitation. A mocking smile curled at my lips. The roles had already reversed. I was no longer the little girl who couldn't even decide the fate of a cat. Chapter 21. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. I attended my friend Robin's birthday banquet. She teased me with a smile. When are you going to let me drink your wedding wine? I took a sip of my drink, smiling without answering. Robin's eyes sparkled with gossip as she tilted her head and glanced toward the silent figure in the corner, Damien. After your divorce, he regretted it and kept following you around. Haven't you ever thought about taking him back? After the divorce, I didn't want any more contact with Damien, yet he always appeared within my field of vision. Each time, it felt so natural, like coincidence, that I had no reason to drive him away. I heard Lillian's child was from her ex-husband. They had a huge fight and officially split. Damien even gave Lillian a large sum of money, fully earning himself the reputation of a world-class simp. Martinez's father, enraged, threw him out of the family home. In the end, Lillian didn't fare well either. After returning to her ex-husband, she was tormented until she was barely alive, and the child was lost. But none of it had anything to do with me anymore. I relaxed my brows and glanced at Robin teasingly. Then why didn't you go back to your own ex? Robin was speechless. Fine. I get it, you've got someone new, she said irritably. When is that younger guy coming back? I pulled out a cigarette, but just as I put it to my lips, I thought of someone's warning. I smiled and tossed it away. Soon, after the banquet ended, I rubbed my temples and planned to have Claude pick me up. Damien followed me out. He had been drinking. His steps were unsteady, and the moment he saw me turn around, his eyes turned red. Paula, his voice trembled, carrying a careful fragility. I nodded at him politely. 3 years ago, Damien gave up his shares and begged his father for one last chance, entering a subsidiary to train. He did not disappoint. He secured one project after another. Now his achievements were remarkable. Outsiders even praised Martinez's father for having 2 capable sons. In business, there are no permanent enemies. When they met, they still politely addressed each other as CEO Martinez. Compared to 3 years ago, he was now steady, restrained, and thriving in the business world. He no longer showed any signs of losing control. Yet at this moment, in those deep, unreadable eyes, there was something long absent, fragility and restraint. His lips moved slightly, but no words came out. I turned to leave, but he suddenly rushed forward and hugged me from behind. Let go! I frowned and tried to break free, but his grip only tightened. No, Paula. I was wrong, I've regretted it every single day for 3 years. I tried so hard to become better. Just to be worthy of you. Do whatever you want to punish me. Just don't ignore me, okay? Lillian's child isn't mine. Do you know how happy I was at that moment? I even started to thank her. Because it finally gave me a chance to come back to you. Can we start over? I and Lucky really miss you. I didn't respond. All I could hear was the cold wind brushing through dead leaves. Then, a burning tear fell onto my neck. Damien choked so hard he could barely form complete sentences. I shower 3 times a day. Please don't think I'm dirty, okay? I don't care about you and Luciano. As long as I can stay by your side, even as your lover. I'm willing, please? I remained unmoved. My face cold as I pried his fingers off one by one. He let out a broken sob. Paula, you did so much for me. Please, don't throw me away so easily. No. Chapter 22. I froze violently, slowly turning back in disbelief. Luciano was standing not far away. A long coat outlined his tall, lean figure. In just 3 years, he had shed his youthful softness. His features had become sharper, more refined, and carried a faint edge of coldness. He was nothing like the clingy boy from before. He walked over with long strides and naturally placed an arm around my shoulder. His gaze dark as he stared at Damien. Ex-husband, he said flatly. What exactly do you think you're doing with my girlfriend? That title almost made me laugh. I held back my smile and patted him. All right, let's go home. Luciano immediately softened. He carefully took my hand, smiling like a child who had just been given candy. Damien stood frozen, watching our intimate closeness as if we were the only 2 people in the world. The light in his eyes dimmed inch by inch, leaving only endless regret. He forced a tragic smile and staggered back 2 steps. His voice was hoarse and trembling. Paula, so I really don't have a chance anymore, do I? I looked at him and curved my lips slightly. At least leave yourself some dignity. Damien. Tears poured out of him like a broken dam. He wiped them away hastily, took a deep breath, and then lowered his head with a self-mocking laugh. Luciano, he said suddenly, if you don't treat her well, I'll kill you. Luciano raised an eyebrow. Big bro, I'm not as blind as you are. You threw away a treasure and treated a trash woman like gold, honestly. That's just stupid. Then he smiled innocently. But still, thanks. Ex-husband. Damien clenched his fists tightly, veins bulging grotesquely across his hand. Yet beneath his anger was only helplessness and heartbreak. Luciano had always been the kind of person who could kill someone with words alone. I pulled him away and didn't look back. Why didn't you tell me you were coming back? Luciano held my hand tightly, his warm palm driving away the chill of early winter. I wanted to surprise you. Instead, I walked straight into an attempted wall-stealing scene. He stopped, lowered his lashes, and muttered softly, Paula. I'm jealous. Something inside me softened. In front of him, all my emotions finally had somewhere to land. Luciano, I'm here. I want to kiss you. Before he could even react, I pulled him down by the back of his neck. Our breaths collided instantly, warmth and softness intertwining as his faint scent enveloped me. Under the glow of neon lights, the first snow began to fall quietly.